Executive function at work. How does it show up and how can you recognize it? Hi, I'm Brett. I'm an autistic boss with ADHD, and one of the key things I like to talk about on this channel is how ADHD and autism, also known as AUDI or AuDHD, can show up in the corporate workplace. As an autistic leader with ADHD who has served in a senior leadership role for more than 4 years, but has been a manager for more than 10 years. In this video, I'd like to go over what executive function and struggling with executive function, but someone with autism or ADHD might have at work. Now, the key thing to remember is we can't diagnose people, and we may not necessarily be able to ask if they have a diagnosis of one or the other. So in many cases, if we're looking to understand someone's behavior or we're looking to understand why someone is or isn't acting a particular way, especially as a manager, it's helpful to better understand what these signs are and what the challenges that someone might be facing so that you can show up with support. The other key thing I would stress is that there are so many strengths. There is a vast array of strengths with autism and ADHD, and with autism and ADHD combined in one person. Whenever we're talking about these things, to take this approach from a strength-based approach. While I am going to talk about specific challenges, these challenges are simply barriers accommodated for to help any employee become that much more stronger. I certainly can't speak for all people with autism or all people with ADHD. Everyone has their own unique and personal lived experience and experiences ADHD and autism in their own and different way. Every ADHD brain is different, every autistic brain is different. First and foremost, what is executive function? Executive functions are the cognitive processes that occur in our brain that help us with things like problem solving, task management, making decisions. Memory is included inside executive function. These are mostly things that happen in the frontal part of our brain. However, for those of us with autism, ADHD, or both, those neural processes are literally designed differently for our brains than what is considered a neurotypical brain. And that development, which we are born with, manages how we control our executive function or how our executive function skills work. Now, I am not a medical expert, I am not a psychiatrist, and I am not someone who is deep on neuroscience. I am an autistic manager with ADHD, and I specifically talk about how these things show up at work. If you would like more knowledge and more reading about executive function, or specifically more about just understanding ADHD and autism, I have a number of resources in the description section, but I will tell you right off the bat, I would strongly recommend How to ADHD, both the YouTube channel and the book, Dr. Ned Hollowell, specifically Embrace Autism, which covers a tremendous amount of both autism and ADHD and how it shows up in both. And I would encourage Neurodivergent Insights, which is both a website and a social media account from Dr. Megan Nuff, and she has an incredible book out there to help support people with autism and ADHD and self-care. And throughout this video, I'm going to be speaking about my personal experience with executive function, but I'm also going to be referencing the resources that I've mentioned as well. All right, let's get into breaking down what executive function looks like and how it shows up at work, and some tips for how you can support planning and prioritizing. One of our biggest challenges is organizing and prioritizing, and specifically organizing tasks and setting priorities. Even more so if it's something that we're not necessarily interested in doing, if it's something that doesn't necessarily appeal to our specific interests that we have, it can be so much more of a struggle to get motivated, to get started, and what we often call task prioritization or task initiation to getting into those specific tasks. Sometimes we need help finding our way in. Sometimes we need help looking at the very big picture of how to get into these tasks or how to get something started or how we can approach that task, or knowing everything about that task so that we can get organized. With ADHD, we struggle with procrastination, and we also struggle with seeing the big picture. Anytime someone can explain to us the big picture, that helps us tremendously. Or those of us who are autistic might also struggle with more rigid thinking or difficulty shifting focuses between one task or another. Helping us see the need for the prioritization or to see how those tasks are connected is also very helpful. With ADHD, anytime we can specifically break down the tasks and then prioritize them is a tremendous help. So if you're a manager looking to help somebody who's maybe struggling with task initiation or getting started, sometimes we're overwhelmed by how big a picture it is. Even though we need to see the big picture, we can sometimes be really overwhelmed by the big picture. So if you can sit with us and help us break down those tasks and really break those down and help us figure out specifically where to prioritize those tasks, tasks. Also, to do this in a strength-based approach, if you know your employee or you know your person on this team and you know what their strengths are, dialogue that you can have with them specifically when you're talking about breaking down those strengths, if you can tie in where their strengths are to where the priorities are and how to break down those tasks, is going to be tremendously helpful. One of the great things about both is our ability to hyperfocus. That is a strength where we can lean into. So if you know you have a really detailed project, that's something that's going to be of interest to us, give us that thing to go off and hyperfocus on so that we can really get to know everything about that. And if it's in particular an interest of ours, you're going to get back a lot of detailed work in response to that ask. Another area to think about, the more you can help us give clear structure and as many details a part of the plan is going to help a lot. So in ADHD, we want to see the big picture. With autism, we want to see the detailed plans. If we're ADHD and autistic, we want both. Within that same space, we're also going to need to know the structure of where our work begins and ends. If someone else is coming in to take a part of that work or piece of that work, that's incredibly helpful for us to know as well. Now, I've mostly covered this. Task initiation is one of the harder parts for us. Also, in particular, if it's something we don't want to do. If we can say, do this part in about 5 or 15 minutes, even possible if you're watching this video and you're not a manager, set yourself a 5 or 15 minute timer to just sort of help yourself get through this one thing. Set a timer, get that 5 or 15 minute thing done, and then after that, go get a dopamine hit from something. Go do something you really enjoy, go take a break, go take a walk, go get like a nice beverage, go get a treat or something, and then come back and pick up again. You need that sort of treat at the other end of the thing you don't want to do in order to help you get through that. And if you set that timer, you can work a little bit more knowing that that timer is counting down. Once we sort of get into the rhythm of doing these things, it makes that task initiation a lot easier as we get in and out of the different tasks that we have to do, especially if those tasks are broken down and prioritized so that we can start crossing those things off that list. As we literally cross things off our list, it also helps our motivation as well, seeing how much we've accomplished and seeing how little is left to still do. Here again, very clear instructions are key. Again here, this is the part I would stress to any manager watching this video, is if you can bring them a part of this task or this project that appeals to their strengths, of their interests, of their special interests, of the things that they're really good at, and you can walk them through the areas they're really good at and how they can apply that skill to this project, that's going to help considerably. If you can show them that, if you can bring them to that, that's going to make a huge difference both in their engagement at work, but also helping them do a really great job on this project. Next up is working memory. Keeping track of multiple steps or pieces of information simultaneously can be a real struggle, especially for me. This is something that I really struggle with. I have a lot of sticky notes. I have a lot of apps to sort of help me figure these things out. I do a lot of note taking so that I don't forget. I will literally write exactly down what somebody says word for word so I don't miss a point or miss the thing that I'm specifically do. For those of us who are autistic, a visual aid or written instructions. For me, I'm a verbal processor. I like to hear you walk it out, so I may need the written instructions and I may need to have you talk me through it and then have the written instructions with me as I think back to the conversation we just had as you were talking me through that. That's not every autistic person, but that is specifically something that helps me. Visual things can also help considerably to help manage and retain information. For those of us with ADHD, a lot of reminders, sticky notes. My calendar at work, my Outlook calendar is filled with tons of reminders, tons of timers, tons of deadlines. All those things help me to remind me so that when I'm looking ahead, I know how much time I have for this task or that task. When these systems are in place, it can help us with our working memory to keeping track of all those different things. Another thing that comes up with executive function is self-monitoring. Sometimes this is our ability to monitor our own performance and make adjustments accordingly. Some of us are very hyper aware of how we are or are not doing. Again, for those of us with ADHD, sometimes there's rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and we are too hyper aware of what we think we are or are not doing. And for those of us who are autistic as well, sometimes we can have struggles with interpreting feedback or even interpreting instructions. Regular check-ins are so important because it allows you to have an accountability partner to check in on how tasks are going. Very clear, constructive feedback is critical for us. Positive reinforcement is also very important for both ADHD and autism, helping us understand our areas of improvement, but also in particular keep in mind what rejection sensitivity dysphoria is and how critical it is to be aware of that when talking about critical feedback or positive reinforcement or talking to someone about their performance or their self-improvement or areas for improvement. The more we can be aware of the language that we use, specifically when we're talking about someone with autism and ADHD or both, will really make a huge difference. And it's just good practice. That's just good at-work practice. That's good leadership. That's good management in general. Flexibility. Adapting to change can be difficult for us. Certainly, it's difficult for me. I always struggle with change. I always struggle with change, and the more advanced notice I have that it's coming, and the more that I can get used to it, and the more that I can get comfortable with that, the better it is. There's a phrase we like to use called gradual release or gradual understanding. Gradual. The more you can kind of bring somebody along, gradually bring them along to that change, it's incredibly helpful. The more we can make space for talking through that change, understanding the change, understanding the big picture, how we fit into those big pictures, how we fit into a task or role or any of those different things helps considerably in adjusting to change. Also knowing a timeline. How much time do I have to sit with that thing? How much time do I have to ask questions about that thing? How much time can I get used to this new idea as I adapt to change, and knowing what I can and can't do around the scope of that change is also very critical. You want to avoid being the kind of leader who addresses change, sort of drops the change news, and then expects an immediate positive response. You really want to give people time to sit with the change, understand it, try it on, get comfortable with it. Be patient with that question asking. That question asking can be critical because not only can that question asking help in terms of moving someone forward and understanding and accepting change, there might also be things that that person has seen. In particular, again, the strength-based approach of where an autistic or ADHD brain is seeing something. You may hear things, ideas, challenges, things you didn't think of, great ideas, as they process that change and look at the whole picture. Again, knowing the big picture, knowing the integral steps in those situations, the integral steps in those change, can really bring the organization a lot of benefits if we lean into those strength-based approach when we let someone like me sit with that information and process and think aloud with you. Anytime you can lean into an interest-based approach with an employee with autism or ADHD or both can really enhance what an employee is capable of doing. The more you can kind of create work environments that accommodate for all these things, it reduces somebody's anxiety considerably. Knowing that they can have a leader, a boss, a manager, someone who they can trust who's going to create the right work environment for them, it's going to reduce their anxiety and it's going to give them more engagement work, and they're going to be more comfortable coming to you when they're facing a challenge. If you know that this is how these symptoms are starting to show up, you might be able to create a really great work environment for somebody, which at the end of the day will work for everybody. What can you do as a manager to remove barriers for them? Question I'm a big fan of is, what do you need to be successful in this role? That's a great opportunity to lead with curiosity and listen into what a person's strengths may be. And that's certainly a conversation you want to prep somebody for and not just call them into your office, sit down and have that conversation about, because that's going to trigger rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or it's just going to make somebody freeze and possibly not always give the best answer. Certainly for me, that would make my brain freeze. Scheduling a conversation like that, knowing the details of the conversation and what you'd like somebody to bring to the conversation certainly would help and go a long way as well. So again, these are just small chunks, small snippets of how executive function can show up. Now, this is read up on executive function from How to ADHD, both in the book and the YouTube channel. Embrace Autism is a website, Neurodivergent Insights, and of course, Dr. Ned Hallowell and all the many years of writing that he's done on this. I'm Brett, the Audi Boss. If you have found any of this helpful, I invite you to subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, let me know more about some of the different things that are happening in your work world and any questions that you might have about being neurodivergent at work. Please like and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow, and let me know if you have any comments that you would like to see me do more videos about being in the corporate workplace with ADHD and autism, AuDHD, or Audi. Thanks for watching.